Invasive species affect us all. Public health, agriculture, and native biodiversity are being increasingly harmed. This is a problem that deserves more attention. The focus of our program is on yellow star thistle. It shows land managers some ways to better control this invasive plant. It also asks everyone to think more about how we can better protect and restore the great beauty and natural heritage that blesses California. The edge of a continent. Ages old. It knows about change and persistence. However, the last 2 centuries have been more eventful than most, and much of California's uniqueness has been lost or put at risk. One event was the near total loss of California's native grasslands. Before agriculture and development took their share, introduced annual grasses like wild oat ran riot and now dominate where native perennial grasses and wildflowers once ruled. Now another biological invasion is transforming much of California's grasslands and other open areas. Yellow star thistle, an annual native to Eurasia, has exploded across the landscape in recent decades, covering at least 10 million acres in the year 2000. This one species could potentially colonize over 30 million acres, 30% of California. Yellow star thistle was introduced accidentally, probably several times as a contaminant in alfalfa seed imported to grow for animal forage. Yellow star thistle does offer late-season forage. Some birds eat the seeds. Many insects drink its nectar. European honeybees love it. But the drawbacks far outweigh these uses.
When an exotic plant comes in, like yellow star thistle, it grows at the expense of the native plants. It eliminates them. It's very invasive, so it's one of the ones we just can't really tolerate.
Yellow star thistle is a problem in a number of different areas within California for different reasons. In parklands and in the foothill areas, yellow star thistle is choking out native biodiversity, and in foothill areas in many parts of the state, it interferes with cattle production. It can be an undesirable species, and once it gets to a certain level of spininess, there's very few animals that will eat it. It's toxic to horses, and California has over 8 million horses in the state, probably over 1 million ranchette-like areas, and so yellow star thistle is a big problem there.
Recreation also suffers, and we are only now realizing the vast amount of water it consumes.
About 4 years ago, I started noticing star thistle really increasing in general. 1998 in particular, with the El Nino, we've seen star thistle really exploding and finding it in the habitat of the rare plants.
I've seen areas in Oregon where the land values have said to have been reduced by 60%. If you look up and down the state, it's, you know, you look on Highway 5 and 99 and a lot of our major highways, they're just inundated with it. It's just terrible.
Well, I've seen a very noticeable change. There wasn't any up on Mount Diablo. It just seems to be marching over an ever-widening area.
And we also don't enjoy riding through the parks when it is so difficult to watch your horse being stuck like that.
Then there is chewing disease. Yellow star thistle can be deadly poisonous to some horses. If eaten over a month or more, it can cause brain lesions. Once the symptoms appear, the damage is done, and it's usually fatal. The animal will waste and die by starvation.
But I've seen horses that's been out on it for years and years and years and never get it. And then all of a sudden, bingo, there'll be one out of that bunch that'll get it. And it's a horrible death for a horse. Don't let them depend on that, because it'll get them.
A member of the sunflower family, Yellow star thistle is an annual that can grow over 5 feet tall. The leaves and stems are blue-green and covered by tiny hairs. Note how the leaf bases extend down the stem and look like ridges or blades. Young plants can form a rosette or grow more upright if shaded. Rosette leaves are deeply lobed and have a triangular tip. The flowers are bright yellow and surrounded by inch-long spines. There are no close relatives native to California. However, tocolote, another common invasive species here, is a close look-alike. One flower head can produce up to 80 seeds. Big plants generate 10,000 seeds or more, and viability runs as high as 95%. However, the seeds cannot travel far without help, and most germinate within a year, although some may survive for 5 or more years. After flowering, the plant dies and turns gray. The spines are shed, leaving balls of fuzzy chaff. The skeletons often build up into a dense thatch. With the fall rains, seeds begin to germinate. Flushes of seedlings can be found under last year's skeletons. Over the winter and spring, the plants send down a deep taproot, sometimes several feet. Then, typically in April or May, after many other annuals have died, the plants will bolt by sending up tall, branched stalks, which form new flowers that continue to bloom over the summer.
It's a matter of if it has sunlight, a lot of sunlight, and if it doesn't get really, really cold for a long time, and if there's some residual water in the soil, it will grow if you plant it.
However, star thistle dislikes a lot of irrigation, tillage, mulching, or cultivation, and thus is rarely a weed in most crops. Some orchards and grape fields are exceptions. Star thistle is a road runner. The seeds are spread most often by human activity, but will seize any opening made by human or natural disturbance. Once it has a toehold, star thistle can turn into a monoculture, displacing many native species. Research has revealed that solid stands of star thistle draw from the soil at least 3 to 8 inches of rainfall a year. This is a hidden but huge effect. Yellow star thistle may even be using chemical warfare to outcompete other plants. Evidence suggests that some Starthistle species use this strategy. In either case, a combination of traits and circumstances has allowed yellow star thistle to become perhaps the most dominant plant in California. So there is no way we know of to eradicate yellow star thistle from all of the state in an environmentally safe manner. However, many restoration and conservation efforts could hardly proceed without addressing this plant. We can prevent it from spreading into vulnerable yet uninvaded habitats. Smaller infestations can be eradicated safely. And with some adjustments in management or progress in biocontrol, many believe it possible to sharply reduce the abundance of this weed. The control methods outlined in this program are not meant to be cookie-cut. They are forces to be reckoned with, and as tools must be handled with care. Furthermore, to be effective against star thistle, they must be combined and sustained. Stopping seed production is key, and there are many ways to do this.
There's herbicides, there's mowing management, grazing management, prescribed burning, even manual control, and cultivation depending on where you are. One of the key things is that it's important to use an integrated approach, and that whatever you use is going to be very, very site specific, and it's going to reflect the goals that you've set for your site.
Other control considerations include prevention, containment, if eradication is feasible, or whether long-term management is the best one can hope for. Prevention can literally save you years of trouble. Consider hay.
Hay's used both for animal forage, but it's also used a lot now for erosion control. And the hay can be harvested from an area that has a lot of yellow star thistle and be moved up, a few miles or hundreds of miles away, and then bring the infestation into a completely new watershed.
To address this, California has recently initiated a weed-free hay and straw certification program. In addition to clean hay, we can prevent the spread of Starthistle by using clean seed, equipment, and road materials. Also watch out for weed seeds on your vehicle or person. Hand pulling can be very effective against early arrivals, outliers, and in final mop-up. As long as the plant is pulled out below the root crown, it will not resprout.
A number of park employees would just take it upon themselves to stop there and pull the yellow starthistle, and quickly figured out that if we got out there to hand pull before the seed was produced, before the yellow flowers were showing, that was a time we could get out there and just leave the plants laying on the ground for mulch.
Mowing is an option for small areas. People have reduced starthistle populations by over 90% in a 3-year period. However, early mowing of starthistle will only aggravate matters.
It pushes the branching patterns lower down to the soil surface, and yellow starthistle is benefits from that early mowing. And the optimum time to mow is when yellow starthistle is in the early flowering stage, when about 2 to 5% of the plants are in early flowering.
Grazing animals like elk have been in California for ages. Of course, not all grazing is the same, and here in the West there's been controversy about grazing livestock.
Livestock have been part of our grasslands since they were introduced in the 1700s. And the fact that they've been here has resulted in many changes in our rangeland and grassland landscapes. And it's interesting because now in our grasslands where grazing is reduced, in many cases diversity goes down because of the influence of exotic annuals and things like yellow starthistle.
Grazing can also reduce biodiversity. We present grazing here merely as another tool to consider that can lower populations of starthistle.
It is poisonous to horses, but ruminant animals such as sheep, goats, and cows can graze it without any problem whatsoever and actually do gain on yellow starthistle.
However, proper timing remains essential.
For example, if you graze yellow starthistle in the winter and spring, and then pull cattle off, particularly if you get some late season rains, that's the kind of situation or the kinds of conditions that will actually increase yellow starthistle. The optimum time would be to delay grazing until the late bolting stage of yellow starthistle. So you bring animals on after the annual grasses, and they have started to die off, and yellow starthistle is just starting to what we call bolt. It's getting ready to flower, but it's not in the spiny stage. And then you bring the animals on and hit the plants very hard.
Starthistle and other weed seeds can hitch a ride in and on livestock. Some cleaning or quarantine may be needed before moving animals to uninfested lands.
I look at using herbicides like I looked at using antibiotics when I practiced medicine. You use them for a year or 2 or maybe even 3 years while you're trying to get your ecosystem back into some type of balance.
Several herbicides, selective and non-selective, pre-emergent and post-emergent, are registered for yellow starthistle control on pastures, rangelands, and non-crop areas. We only examine one recently registered selective herbicide.
It's known that transline does affect a number of important plant families in California, The Fabaceae or the pea legume family is one. The sunflower family, Asteraceae, is another. The Polygonaceae and the Solanaceae are families that are affected by transline. And they add a tremendous amount of diversity to our flora, and it's therefore, I think, really important to be cognizant of the plants that are out there when you're using transline, because if you put the transline out and those plants are there, it could bring about the demise, particularly if there's not a sufficient seed bank. This is soap plant, and it's in the line that was sprayed with transline, and there are many plant families, fortunately, that aren't affected by transline, and the Liliaceae is one of them.
Grasses are especially happy, in this case creeping wild rye, a native rhizomatous species.
Last year, before this was mowed and sprayed, this was a dense canopy of yellow star thistle, and if there was star thistle here now, clearly it would be very competitive against creeping wild rye. It would be sucking moisture out of the ground and would be blocking light. So this is a nice example of some release that we've gotten from that particular treatment.
Because of issues like safety and air quality, society agrees that we control fire. But banishment is not a realistic option. Also, in ecosystems like grasslands, many species are adapted to and may even depend upon periodic fires. For star thistle control, prescribed burning is a tool that can have several advantages.
We're using fire in this situation because the alternate mode of controlling star thistle here is either to disturb the ground by disking, or perhaps mowing, or maybe spraying. And none of those alternatives are really economical here or practical.
We take special attention to make sure the fire doesn't harm the oak trees. The firefighters will go around and actually start the burns from the perimeter of the oak tree and burn outward before the initial burn. And that creates a buffer zone so that when the main fire comes to the oak tree, it won't harm the oak tree. It'll do a minimal amount of scorching. If there's an area where they can't do that, they'll put a wet line around the tree.
Timed again at the early 2 to 5% flowering stage, burning can stop that year's seed production. The flames need only girdle the plants. Repeated over 3 consecutive years, burns have reduced star thistle populations and seed banks dramatically. No one should ever attempt prescribed burning on their own. However, one can get the ball rolling.
That's a good place to start, is for the private landowner to contact their local fire agency and see what the possibilities of a prescribed burn on their land are. If they could work up a cooperative agreement with a fire agency and a private landowner, it might work out well. You get two goals accomplished. You're able to train firefighters, provide experience, and control the star thistle.
Biological control is the natural or applied regulation of pest, insect, or weed populations with the use of natural enemies, usually found in the native home of the invasive species. There's no guarantee of success, but for many other pests, the results have been impressive. State and federal researchers have worked very hard to find host-specific biological control agents to humble yellow star thistle.
To date, there have been 6 insects introduced for yellow star thistle control. All of them attack the seed heads. There are insects that are being considered for introduction in the future that attack the roots and the stem, and there is a disease that is being considered for introduction in the future that will also attack the foliage of the plant.
Most effective of the approved agents is the hairy weevil. Another species that's feeding heavily on yellow star thistle is the false peacock fly. Accidentally introduced into southern Oregon in 1994, it has since moved into California, and with several generations a year, its numbers have been building rapidly. This combination of agents is exerting a lot of pressure on star thistle, but the impacts are still not as great as hoped. Competition by other plants against an invader like yellow star thistle may seem like wishful thinking, but in fact it is doable and being done in a number of settings. In open grasslands, once yellow star thistle has been reduced or eliminated, preferred species often re-emerge on their own. Still, it may be helpful or necessary to encourage or introduce desirable species.
Well, the strategy for revegetation is pretty much at the end of the process. First you have to go through and look at the whole land area, evaluate all the problems, the soil types, what plants would work best at what soil types.
Many believe re-establishing perennial grass species may be the best long-term solution for star thistle and other weedy annuals in our grasslands. There are a number of non-native perennial grass mixes available known to effectively compete against yellow star thistle, but this raises the issue of introducing more alien species.
One of the things we have found is that once these exotic perennials are established, the system tends to end up in a monoculture. True, they keep out star thistle, but you lose the biodiversity.
In either case, the perennials are going to need a boost, especially through the first year. After they're established, they can resist reinvasion. When John Anderson of Hedgerow Farms learned that states like Iowa and Kansas use native grasses along their roadsides, he decided that promoting native grasses would be good for California too.
We started working with the native grasses in the early 90s, so it's just really in the last 5 years that we have been able to successfully establish native grassland communities on some of these highly degraded sites. We're well on our way of successfully being able to do it. So why use natives? Because it's the right thing to do, number one. We have lost our grassland ecosystems in this whole country. Our grassland ecosystems are probably the most threatened ecosystems of all.
The need right now is to have a regional, region-wide and holistic approach. We have groups called weed management areas, and weed management areas in a region are really trying to coordinate all the efforts that are going on for a weed like star thistle on all the different types of jurisdictional lands.
The Tehachapi Resource Conservation District has gotten their weed management area in Kern County to work.
It was such a concern, it took over Tehachapi so quickly that people started to get together because we didn't know what it was when it was first here.
And involved they have become. Many businesses, agencies, and private landowners are now enthusiastic players.
If you'd asked me 4 years ago if I would be heavily involved in a weed eradication program, I would have laughed at you.
One key element has been public outreach and the support of the local press.
The Tehachapi News has really been great in publishing articles. I think we've had something like 88 articles published so far.
An Adopt a Highway program was also initiated to control and draw attention to yellow star thistle. While all in its infancy, these efforts are yielding results, and optimism is in the air.
I'm a happy camper because it's all gone pretty much from my place.
So there is a culture of sort of tending the land that exists in different cultures. And the trade-off is, how do we fix a problem? Because something is broke here. We've introduced something that will charge across the landscape and will change the landscape. How do we fix it with the least impact possible? That's the challenge we face.
We hope you found some of this information useful. Thanks for watching.